I called you yesterday and I was like, Pete, there's a lot of jargon here. There's a lot of words that quite frankly have a lot of syllables that I don't understand. What's going on in Florida State in the ACC? And is there a chance they hit the portal and leave for another conference?
I think it's a little too early to say they're going to leave, but we could see things headed in that direction maybe in the foreseeable future. Obviously, the ACC and Florida State have filed lawsuits against each other. Florida State in Florida, ACC in North Carolina. And that kind of remains to be seen. But in a filing from the ACC on Friday, the conference suggested that it might be open to negotiation by using the phrase commercial possibility when referring to the grant of rights. And yeah, I think Florida State wouldn't be doing this if they're not ready to go through the process of hitting the portal possibly. So yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. But I think that negotiations could definitely be in the future.
And is this kind of moving into a territory where it's less about when, or less about when and less about if and more about when it comes to this? Because I think it's sort of on the top of mind now as buzz grows. It's like, is this inevitable that we see Florida State eventually make a move to a different conference?
I think it's safe to say that Florida State is doing everything it can to get outside of the ACC. Our Jeff Cameron at War Chant made the point when he was on with Andy Staples earlier this week that he's heard from some sources that Florida State's ready to pay $150 million. And I think he also mentioned that the ACC could be looking at something more around the $250 million range. And that's for the exit fee and to purchase out the grant of rights. And I think Florida State would be willing to do that. So definitely could be in the cards.
Yeah, I think the 150 to 200, heck, maybe even $572 million question is where would they go? Is it the SEC? Is it the Big Ten? Those kind of feel like they'd be the prime suspects. Is there a fit in your mind if we're speculating wildly here?
Those would be the only two. I think the way you have to look at it, right, is the reason why they want to leave the ACC is because they know the ACC really doesn't have the value of the SEC and the Big Ten. And you look at that ESPN deal that's through June 2036. Florida State wants out, man. All the big brands right now are in the SEC and the Big Ten. I know we were talking about it on the phone yesterday, but you can make just so much more money in those two conferences right now, and it's they have all the power. And we're going to talk about the college football playoff here in a minute, but there's a reason why Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey are kind of running things in Dallas today.
Yeah, and with Florida State, I think a lot of folks in SEC country are like, hey, go to the Big Ten. Get them to the Big Ten. We're happy having Florida be our one school in the SEC. That's the Florida school in our conference. Is the Big Ten kind of the betting favorite in your mind with them potentially going coast to coast and having USC and Florida State in the boat there at that point?
I'm not ready to say there's a betting favorite one way or the other. Sure. But you make a really good point that the SEC is really happy with Florida kind of being their flagship school in the state of Florida. So yeah, I think it's one or the other. I think the one thing that really intrigues me the most, JD, is if Florida State leaves, what value does the ACC have anymore? Because obviously Clemson and North Carolina will want to test the waters too.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's like, hey, we're kind of baking most of the pie here. We're taking home a smaller slice, and Northwestern is making more money than us. Vanderbilt's making more money than us, and that's no shade to those schools. But like you said, with the brand that Florida State has and the brand power they bring to the ACC, feels a little bit counterintuitive for those schools to be the ones that are raking in more than the Noles at this point. Last question here. We've seen how this works, man. It's a buddy system when it comes to conference realignment. Is there a school that you would tie to Florida State in their potential exit from the ACC that could go with them to the Big Ten or the SEC?
Yeah, I would just say looking back over the last 18 months, it's always kind of been Clemson that we've talked about when you talk about Florida State leaving the ACC. So I would have to think that I don't know if Clemson's tied to them at the moment, but I think Clemson is probably the most aggressive in looking at ways to get outside the ACC next to Florida State. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers try to make a move to get involved here.
There we go, man. Dabo and the boys in Florida State, they could be – that'd be one of the first times that Clemson has messed around in the portal, honestly, if they were to make an exit out of the ACC. Now,
I think yeah.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
No, that's a great point. The one thing I do want to mention, though, is while Clemson is trying to maybe get out of the ACC, I think North Carolina or Virginia is arguably, or Miami, are are kind of more attractive to the SEC and the Big Ten than Clemson, and that will just be something to watch as we see this plays out.
I was going to say Miami being in the boat could also, I feel like, just from where I'm sitting, from a football standpoint, make a lot of sense for them to be having two schools within the Big Ten going to the state of Florida. Like, I don't know. We'll see how it all shakes out. And it's funny because we were talking yesterday too. It feels like it's always trending one way. It's always, hey, this is how it's going to be, and then behind closed doors, under the cover of a conversation or a headline, it goes the completely other direction, and we all find out together at one sweeping headline. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.